Hi, my name is Chris Little, and I am the host of The Lifestyle Chase. In 2018, I started this show to have meaningful conversations. I've interviewed over 100 different people, both in and out of the fitness industry. This podcast is something I'm incredibly proud of. Welcome to Season 4. Thanks for joining me. All right, so welcome back to The Lifestyle Chase. I have brought a guest to the show, and I'm going to add some context to this because a few years ago, our mutual friend Andrew Coates suggested to me that I should have Mike Howard on The Lifestyle Chase. And I waited way too long to make that happen, so I'm very happy that I did make it happen today. He's someone who has clearly listened to my show, which I'm always appreciative of. And he's given me feedback about it, and it's made me feel really good. And so with that said, it is an honor to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Thanks so much, Chris. I'm doing great. And thanks, Andrew. Andrew's a great guy. He's connected a lot of people, and I've had the pleasure of being on his show and having met him. That's awesome. It's great that our industry is that way, where we can kind of meet people and interact, and you sort of meet so many people through connections and through different colleagues, which is awesome.
Well, the cool thing is that Andrew literally just has to walk across the gym and just be there at the same time that I am to make these little industry insights and suggestions and stuff. And he's the reason why I went to the Kansas City Fitness Summit. I think I went the year that you might have missed out. I think I went 2019. I'm not sure if you were able to make it that year.
No, I haven't. It's funny because that came across my memories, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, because it usually runs sort of early May, if I remember. It was 8 years ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, there is no way that 8 years have passed since I've been at the KC Fitness Summit. So yeah, I was kind of like a one-hit wonder. I had only gone once, not through any intentional act. It was just sort of life circumstances and whatever, it just kind of good intentions. But it was definitely an amazing, and I, met lots of people through that. And then, it just kind of, just kind of snowballs from there.
Well, that's the absolute truth. Sometimes it's just you can do things several times and that can benefit you in big ways, but you can also do things once and still get a benefit from it. And it's just we can take that into any frame. That could be someone placing value on their first workout as much as value that they place on their 100th workout, because they get to their 100th without their first.
Yes. Yeah. I was thinking about that and how that just relates to everything in life, doesn't it? Right.
For sure. Looking at the branding on your shirt and being aware of lean minded, what was it that inspired lean minded in the first place?
Yeah. So, I think I had transitioned a little bit. I've sort of worn, I would say, different hats within the industry, but also sort of within my own branding and coaching. And I really started to pivot a little bit. I guess I want to say 7 or 8 years ago. Having been in the industry almost 25 years, I felt like I had sort of the biomechanics stuff down. I felt like, I was learning a lot about nutrition. Certainly don't know even the surface level of what's out there, but I felt like I had a decent handle on it. But despite that, I felt like, okay, I feel like there's still stumbling points from my client perspective. And so then I felt like I had to get inside the brains of my clients and really just sort of understand things from more of a mindset perspective, behavioral economics perspective, and even a biological perspective. So thus began a very deep dive, very deep rabbit hole, for which I'm still sort of entrenched in. And I love it. I love learning about all this stuff, but I felt like I just sort of needed to rebrand in a sense. So lean minded sort of came up in terms of something that encapsulates being of a healthy mindset as well. It's sort of moving away from the X's and O's a little bit and more towards the side of our decision making and how a powerful mindset can bolster everything else, and how it starts with the habits, starts with those mini actions. So yeah, I just kind of came up with the name. And to be honest, sometimes when you look for name searches now, it's just like, okay, what URLs are still available? Like what domain search names are still available? So, that was part of it as well. So I decided that, I would shift a little bit and sort of focus more on the mindset habit aspect of, lifestyle change.
For sure. I mean, like when it comes to selecting names, I'm very familiar with that whole process. Like in the journey of
Mhm.
creating the name, The Lifestyle Chase, I kind of decided what I wanted like the vision of the show to be. I understood that I wasn't going
Mhm.
to necessarily like back myself into the corner of just like exercise science or nutrition, stuff like that, because I kind of felt that it
Mhm.
was more on the lens of understanding people's why and just being able
Yeah.
to kind of capitalize on the lessons people have learned over the years.
Mhm.
Because like we often don't talk about the things that kind of stop us in our tracks because that's not glamorous.
Mhm.
That's not what you tie to an award. You don't get recognition for being like, this is the 3 times I almost quit my job. Um, but I found that when people are more open about that, that is what keeps more people going on this journey, whether they be enthusiasts or professionals. Um,
Mhm.
I can only imagine your 25 years time, you must have come across sometimes that may have like stopped you in your tracks, as we say. Can you think of any off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, from a just a meta standpoint, I mean, there's been it depends on how sort of how deep you want to go with this, but I mean, I guess from a career standpoint as well as sort of a life standpoint. So, were you thinking more of from like a professional standpoint of the coaching, or from just a life standpoint?
To be honest, like I think coaching is almost more surface level, and we can overcome
Mhm.
that with a lot more just it doesn't seem as daunting. And what I've often
Mhm.
done with past guests is I'll kind of share some stuff about myself to kind of help frame the question. So for myself, like in my career path, oftentimes it's like feelings of isolation that lead
Mhm.
me to think like, okay, like show's over, we're done. And I
Mhm.
might have the metrics within the business that it could still be going. But
Mhm.
it's the emotional, the social things that
Mhm.
stop me in my tracks. And
Mhm.
these are the things I don't hear on other people's shows. These are the things that I have to look far and
Mhm.
wide to find people talk about. So if we could go down that path, I think that
Yeah.
would be what empowers people the most.
Sure. Yeah, that makes complete sense. So yeah, no, absolutely. And I've had like definitely quite a few moments of, I would say, sort of either aha moments or those pivotal moments, those fork in the road moments where, I could have been out of this industry at least, half a dozen times, and almost was at times. Right. And, I say I've been in the industry 25 years. That doesn't mean I've been in it full time for 25 years. And I just took this path and all of a sudden I got successful and just kind of kept going with it. It's been a lot of ups and downs, from sort of life struggles to, having the insecurities of putting myself out there, and insecurities of the whole, imposter syndrome, that sort of thing. So I was working sort of part time, trying to find my feet, trying to find my way. So I wore different hats, and I was actually, a part time courier for a while, to pay the bills while I was trying to make a go of it. And I had these voices in my life saying, "No, you should just kind of quit training. You've given it a good shot, but you got to go that stable path." And then I talked to a mentor of mine. This was about 13 years ago or so, and I said, "Yeah, man, I don't know what to do." Like, and he's just like, "Quit." He's like, "Quit tomorrow. Quit that job. Quit the career job." I was like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, no, what you think is holding you back. Your safety net is actually what is holding you back. That is the thing that's holding you back. What you think is keeping you afloat, and what you think is providing that security, that's going to be your detriment." So he said, "You know what? You already have the tools. You just have to make a go of it now." And that was a pivotal moment as well. And then you just get little insights here and there from, like, from clients, and you just learn things along the way. And it's done this, like, it's dipped and it's gone up a little bit. And there's definitely been highs and lows, but I have not once even regretted, that decision that brought me to where I am now, despite the struggle, right? Like I've got 2 kids, but I'm divorced, you know what I mean? So it's like, there's that stress of life, and then just like not know what I'm going to do next or where I'm going to go. And then, COVID hits. And so, there's a lot of different life stuff, and not nothing that's unique to me per se, but, I think we all have our own journeys. And I think there's always, something that's going to throw wrenches at you. And I think you just got to kind of run with it. And I knew that this is what I wanted to do. This was not a job. It was a calling. And here I am. And I've worn sort of, like I said, various hats within the industry as a personal trainer and, writer and I run courses, and now I do some retreats. So I thrive on being able to do different stuff within this industry, because it can be a very exciting industry in so many ways.
Well, you answered that really well. And there's a lot that people can pull from that. And I'll kind of start us off. Like, when you talk about how you spent time being a courier, one thing that I like to highlight with side hustles, because like, for full disclosure, for anybody listening to this show, my entire time hosting this podcast, I've had side hustles, and I've chosen, rather than to hide that, than to just own that. Because like, in a discussion with my dad was like, everything that you do, you found a way to monetize it. Like, whether it be something that feels like work or something that feels like fun, I just put in enough reps that it became valuable. And there's no shame in that, because there's a lot of crossover between a lot of different skills, whether it be communication skills, transportation skills, just so many things that can add value for us in a business standpoint, just in the sense that like, you need a variety of skills to help people. And the more skills that you acquire through job acquisition, the more unique you can be, and the more ways that you can help that person in a genuine way. Because we're not working with like people who were made out of cookie cutters. We're working with people who have done those jobs, who have faced those struggles, who have had the adversity that's tested them to their limit. And we're learning to connect with them better than many more other people that they've talked to in the past. And that's kind of why they stick with us. So anybody that's listening to a podcast might be going through a moment where they're having some like introspection, some reflection. They're like, oh man, like, what am I going to do? And they might not have met a mentor like the one that you're talking about. And this could be their light at the end of the tunnel. But on a segue, let's talk about that mentor. Do you feel like you could give him a shout out or talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. His name's Brian Grasso. So he's done some amazing things in the industry. And I met Brian way back in college. And we just we became friends, and then sort of didn't communicate for a while. And then, of course, the advent of social media, I find, hey, man, and I see what he's up to. And he's done all these great things in the industry, from, starting a youth fitness certification program. And he's the one that I sort of piggyback that mindset aspect to. Like, he teaches a lot of courses on mindset and whatnot. And, he's always been a sound, solid voice in my life, and he just like full of wisdom, but like just in the friendliest, non-judgmental way, right? Like, it's always, every time you talk to him, you feel like you're getting a hug. He's one of those guys, right? Like, you just kind of so I've always kind of looked up to him, and he's always had some amazing insights, and you just sort of listen to him talk, and you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I wish I remembered a lot of that. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things, yeah, what he said. But yeah, no, you take little tidbits from it. But I'll never forget that conversation, which was kind of like, spun things around for me. And like I said, it wasn't like it was a completely linear switch. I mean, I definitely went through the stresses and, of, okay, am I going to make rent this month? Right. And that's not, that's not just a way back when phenomenon. Like, it's, that's recent too. So it's like, but like I said, I never looked back, and I never, not even for a second, thought, okay, I wish I didn't resign from that comfortable, stable position. And to your point, I mean, there's absolutely, like, if you're listening to this, there's no shame at all in having a side hustle. No, I think that's pretty, not only common, I think advisable, right? I think, you have to do, and like you said, you gather all this data and these skills and these, just these learning experiences from different domains. And, I think there's so much value in that.
Absolutely. And I mean, when it comes to all the different things that you do within your career, like writing being one of them, something that stands out to me is you've done a lot of work where you've been able to listen to a lot of other people's podcasts. And that's part of what connected us, where you actually listened to my show and were able to kind of pick out things on that show. What kind of sparked your interest in being someone who went through content, just as something that interested you? What gravitated you towards that?
Yeah, I think I've always had this like intense curiosity of learning. And I just, and I think, there's various forms. We're very lucky now in this day and age where there's so many channels in which you can accumulate knowledge, right? And I never did well in a traditional academic setting where there was deadlines and there was a specific curriculum, but I love just learning these things at my own pace. And I found like I was doing a lot of commuting. So, audiobooks and podcasts became my jam, right? So that I think comprises probably about 90 95% of what I consume. I still do read some things, but I do find that I'm just, I mostly listen now. So yeah, no, I felt like that was a good outlet to learn things from, and in whether it's sort of the behavioral economic psychology or business, it's just there's so many realms, and I felt I've picked up so many different interests based on that, and I did for a time through Jonathan Goodman's personal training development center. I was sort of a volunteer for picking the best podcasts of the week, right? So I think that's partly how I came across yours, and that was a great experience in that it almost sort of forces you to listen to some of these on a bit of a deadline. So you're kind of like, okay, I can't just put it on a back burner. And it was good because it gave me sort of that commitment device to tune in and listen and learn. So, I enjoyed that aspect of it, and that was a great experience. So now it's just like, yeah, man, I'm in a car, I'm listening to something, and a lot of different domains fascinate me. I still do listen to fitness podcasts, but I feel like I'm sort of expanding into more of the psychology and philosophy stuff. So it's cool.
Well, for sure, that definitely mirrors my own experience with like content consumption. And like to add a layer to that, just basically anytime that I felt doubtful about myself, with my presence as a trainer or the trajectory of my career, I basically just start to dive further into how I can become better, understanding that I have room to improve, and like I'm not at the top, like I'm not, no matter how far along in my career I go, I'll always have something to learn. And there's always going to be someone who can teach me something that I don't know. And so just the openness to that is what has helped me quite a bit. And just from like the nerves and from the imposter syndrome, mainly being able to continually tune into other people's perspectives. And like, I definitely delve outside of the fitness space with my content consumption, because that's how I'm going to relate to the industries of some of my clients. And that's how I'm going to be able to communicate in ways that they feel heard and seen, and not just like projected onto. But with that said, what is something that stood out to you content wise, and that could be in any arena, that has kind of changed your frame of mind with things?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like 2022 has been a stellar year so far from some of these groundbreaking books. So, I'm learning from podcasts, but just recently I've read a few books that have been like really, really, really good. And one's called Imaginable by an author named Jane McGonigal. So she's both a futurist and a game designer. So her insights in terms of, basically she creates simulations, and it's such a fascinating look in terms of human behavior and future forecasting. So one of her things was like episodic future thinking, right? Which is just this kind of a nerdy way to just say, okay, thinking about your future. So imagine yourself getting up like 5 years. And it's not just like, okay, what are you doing 5 years down the road? It's like, who are you waking up beside? What are you eating for breakfast? What does the world look like? And by doing that, it helps you in the present shape what you want that preferred future to look like. So I found that was like, I opened up some new possibilities. I had heard of episodic future thinking through the research that I'd done, but that just kind of opened a new door. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. So just trying to consume some of that. The Science of Stuck is another one. So this is in the realm of sort of, psychology and personal help and that sort of thing. So that's by the author's named Britt Frank. And that's kind of a good combination of science and, a little bit of a slap upside the head in terms of like, what your preconceived ideas are about like things like trauma. And that's a fascinating dive as well. So all these things and all these domains, I feel another one is Get It Done by Ayelet Fishbach. So Katie Milkman wrote one as well this past year called How to Change. So a lot of it is based on change science and behavioral science, neurobiology, that sort of thing that I'm nerding out on. But I think it just opens things up to a wide variety of different ways to look at what I do. And all this to sort of, I feel like you have a similar goal is to better help people. Like, how can I become the best coach possible? And I feel like by delving into these other domains, I can, gather these insights that will help others. Right. So I think that's a really cool thing. And that's the ultimate end goal for me, really. But when you look at these things, you kind of see that, here's a full length mirror. Wow, this is stuff I'm not doing. Right. I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's time to look inside myself and see what changes I can make. Right. Because, that's, I'm not standing here on a pulpit. I'm coming from a place of, okay, that vulnerability where, yeah, this is what I struggle with too. Yeah, I've been there, or I am there.
Absolutely. Like there's a lot that you shared there that I both relate to and value. Like in terms of the book recommendations, those are ones that I'm going to pick out and listen to or check out like after this episode, because it's stuff that like I relate to. Recently, I think it was on Amazon Prime or something. There was a movie that was essentially based on like that The Secret or whatever, like the law of attraction. And it sounds a lot like that episodic thinking. And just in the sense that if you are able to kind of see what your future holds, then it's more likely that you're able to kind of facilitate the action steps that are needed and to kind of have that self-awareness that your life will require in order to get yourself into those situations. And I found that to be like, I have so much belief in that mindset that I'm willing to like not have everybody agree with me on like that whole, like, okay, this is my vision for myself. It's a little bit crazy, maybe unrealistic, but this is how it's going to be. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. Like I'm willing to have the person be like, well, I don't think you can do that in that career. Or I don't think you can do it at that, or I don't think you could do it at that age. And I'm like, just the ruthless determination to move forward one step at a time, no matter what it takes. And I think the side piece of that is because of that attitude and that passion, we tend to bring in people to our lives that facilitate that to happen. If we were to, let's say, identify a few catalysts in your life, people that have helped you hit the ground running in little moments, whether they be big moments or little moments, who would those catalyst people be?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky that I have a very supportive family. So, my mom and sisters, they've always been there and they always encourage me, even when I make, dumbass decisions. They're kind of like, they're super non-judgmental and they're very encouraging in that sense, and despite sort of some failed relationships, I have a fantastic girlfriend right now, and she's very supportive. And I have to say, like my clients, man, I look at them as clients, but I've sort of come to see them more as like friends and family almost. And man, just the wisdom that I've accrued from so many of them in different domains has been just like phenomenal. And, I know it's my job to coach them, but in some cases, I feel like I'm getting just as much value in terms of spending time with them. Because I see my kids on the weekend, so like I'm by myself, like, my girlfriend sees her kid during the week. And so it's like, I'm by myself most of the week, but so that's been an outlet for me too. So, it is very much about like forming, creating, cultivating relationships. Rather than like, okay, this is a strict coaching client relationship, right? Like it is in a sense, you're cultivating relationships. And that's the reason why our clients come to see us. To be honest, they're not coming to me because I'm the very best trainer in the world. They're coming to me because they feel comfortable coming to me. They feel like it's going to be a fulfilling hour. They're going to get a workout, but they're also going to, it's going to be an experience. And that's what I continue to try to provide for them. And they keep me fresh. They keep me from stagnating. I think there's, I'm a very lucky guy in that sense, right? That I have very good support systems, and probably don't tell them nearly enough, and I should, but that's the truth of it.
Well, it's cool what you spoke about with regards to how much a person can learn from their clients, because I feel the same way about like my clients. Each and every one of them, no matter their age, their training history, anything about them, each one of them has taught me something, even if they just worked with me for one session, whether it was how I showed up as a trainer, the language that I used, how I showed up in my life, just which cues helped them, like just being open to those opportunities to learn fostered more growth, not only from a professional standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. And it also coincides with how much I value like connection within the industry. Because like earlier in this episode, we talked about how like there can be many, many moments where like our career goes up and down and up and down. But I'm kind of a believer in the sense that when we are going up and down, like our colleagues aren't necessarily in sync with that up and down. So it's an opportunity where we can kind of look for the helpers and then in turn be the helpers when that time comes. And it's sort of just that understanding that like nobody's in this thing alone. Nobody has to do it by themselves. You always got a pal to hop on a video call with or lean on, or as I've talked to many times in the past, just like the different friends and colleagues in the industry who helped me out with little things. And by having that mindset, it makes it less scary to bet on yourself, because you start to be open to like, okay, there's a lot of opportunities here. And the only thing missing is my belief in myself. So what is your approach to kind of like getting into that space where you're like betting on yourself?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, confidence accumulates just through action and through doing things and through not being afraid to make mistakes, and not trying to take on too much at once. And I'm still learning all of this. But yeah, for sure. I think that definitely opens doors, and it's not, again, like everything else, it's not a linear thing, but you're right. I mean, everybody's hitting different peaks at different times, different valleys. And yeah, you really see a lot of the great that comes out of the industry in terms of, the amount of support people are willing to give. And I'm not great at asking for help. That's the thing. And people have sort of, stepped up and asked how I was doing during the pandemic, right? Just out of the blue, like, hey, are you okay? You good? That sort of thing. And it just means so much. So that sort of sparked my impetus to do the same thing and just say, hey man, how you doing? How you holding up? Hey, you know what I mean? And that's I think that's everything. And I think, I've definitely seen some of the best of our industry kind of step up in that sense, because thing is too, I mean, like there are people that we don't even think might be struggling are probably struggling too. You really do see that how much of an impact it can make. And I think that can be a good stepping point to building confidence, to building your own, that what you do does matter. Right.
And I mean, when we think about the people who we assume probably aren't struggling, a lot of that correlates with like social media impact. Like if a big following, we'll kind of look at that and we'll be like, they're doing fine. And something that I try my very best to remind myself to do is kind of invert that, like be like, okay, I see 50,000 followers. Let's imagine they had 5. And we're just looking at their page and we're kind of thinking about them as a person, how they've showed up in our life. And we're thinking, I wonder how they're doing. Like thinking about like their situation or any stressors that they may have, or when it was all the lockdowns and stuff, how like maybe based on their personal life, they might be totally isolated. And I found that taking that frame of mind helps not only me to know who maybe I should check on, but also helps me to keep things in perspective for myself to understand, okay, like it's not like everybody else is on the top shelf and we're on the bottom, or like I'm on the bottom shelf of the thing. It's more so everybody's on a shelf, and like we are more similar in this industry than we are different, because we are all just independent human beings. We're just like giant walking meat packages just trying to cope with this world. With that being said, has there been a time when like an industry colleague has kind of checked on you that kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, I mean, and there's been a few, and I will shout out to Jason Leonards because we both know him, and anybody that knows Jason knows he's just such a nice, genuine guy, and he kind of reached out and said, how are things going? And this is somebody that owns a brick and mortar gym, right? Like he would probably have more stress under the pandemic than most would in the industry. But and yet, so for him to reach out, that meant a lot. And I've had other colleagues as well just say, hey, how you're doing? And sometimes organically a conversation will just come up, and then we'll just kind of, I felt like a lot of what happens with the pandemic is when you start conversations, a lot of it is just commiserating, right? Just say, hey, like how's this affecting you? How are you doing with this? And I feel like too, like we saw a lot of the good defaults of coaches come out. And I think, we just, a lot of people just put their head down and just said, okay, what can I give in this moment? Things are going to be rough for a bit. How can I provide? Right. And that just might be for our fellow clients or for people that follow us. And sometimes when you're feeling like crap and you're down in the dumps, sometimes it does help to be able to sort of give something, even if you don't have a lot of the emotional resources in that moment. Just that little bit you do have. And I think people will remember that. And I think the industry stepped up in a pretty good way in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely glad that you mentioned Jason Leonards, because I'll always take any chance to pump his tires that I can. Yeah. And for anybody that's listening to this, Jason's been on the show, I believe, twice now. So you can kind of learn a little bit about his story, because I'm going to add some context to it, because oftentimes we're going to be in these moments where it's like we kind of feel like we can't build ourselves back up. And we're like, okay, like we've hit rock bottom. And what are we going to do from here? And from what I've learned about Jason over the years, he is someone that has found ways to build himself back up. And he has written comeback stories for himself within his own world and space. And so we have to kind of ask ourselves, like, if, like for myself, if I look at a guy like Jason Leonards and I'm like, I want to be like Jason when I grow up. And that's a true statement. I do want to be like him. He's a great guy. And the way to get there is you kind of have to pay to play. You kind of have to face those obstacles in your life where you kind of feel like, okay, how are we going to build our way up? And you have to kind of will yourself to be consistent through the things that work and show yourself some grace in the things that don't, because we're all humans. So like the long and short of that is that if anybody is going through a moment where they're like, holy crap, how am I going to write a comeback story for this? And they're just like in that doubt, they can know that it does get better. They can know that down the road, suddenly they are equipped with a special kind of bandwidth that allows them to check in with people in a whole different country. That gives them the capacity. Like Jason's helped me out in all kinds of cool ways. He sends a bunch of us shirts with our name on the back. Yeah. Like, that is so special.
That's awesome.
But it's just, we grow through what we go through, which I know sounds cliche for some people, but it's absolutely so true. And so often when we talk to people who face like shitty times, and then we ask, well, would you go back in the time machine and just erase that? Even if it brought them a lot of pain, they don't erase it, which is so profound. So with that being said, it's just life is interesting in which it has us pay a price for admission, and in which it forces us to lean on one another and connect up with one another and be real. But in being open about that, people who haven't heard that from someone might understand that the struggle that they're going through is shaping for a much better, brighter future for them. Even though it won't always be easy, it gets better.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%.
And I mean, I went through that long tangent, but something that I wanted to bring up as we're going through our conversation today is you talked about the retreats. Retreats are something I like. I like the sound of that. I kind of want to know what kind of inspired that to start. What made you start up with that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we're probably going to go back like 6 or 7 years now. And I was, working with a client and, we became friends, and she had recently gotten her yoga instructor certification. And she's like, hey, you know what we should do? We should take a bunch of people to like Costa Rica. You do the fitness stuff and I do the yoga stuff. And I was like, that sounds really good. And I did like, what most people do and just sit on it for like 4 years, didn't do a single thing. And then finally I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. Because as we talked about before, all those insecurities crept up. Oh, could I really do this? Oh, I'm afraid. Oh, what if it doesn't work? Like you go through that whole process of talking yourself out of it. So I think I finally just said, okay, I'm going to bite the bullet, do it, get a few people together. And it did. And it was fantastic. I mean, there were people that I knew that were clients. There were a couple that I didn't know that I became really good friends with. And it was magic. It was, I think it's a fantastic way to just sort of get a bunch of cool people together. You have a health, I called it a flexible health retreat. That was kind of the catchphrase for it, which meant, okay, it's healthy, but, people where there's a happy hour and, there's, it's not, we're not drinking kale smoothies 3 times a week and, meditating for 7 hours a day. Like it, there's an exercise component. We're trying to eat relatively healthy, but it's basically just a bunch of cool people getting together in this absolutely beautiful spot. Where we can kind of connect and just, have really, really sort of experiential growth experiences together. So I have sort of there's an exercise component, and I hire a yoga instructor to do a session in the afternoon. And then there's what I call like deep dive talk. So we talk about things like mindset or, how to age healthfully. And we do talks at night and, and then during the day, we just hang out at the beach and we go on adventures, we surf and whatnot. So, I've sort of tried to turn that into an annual thing. Of course, the last 2 years got derailed, but I'm hoping to get back at it. So I'm going to do one in Costa Rica come February of 2023. And then I'm going to try to do at least one more in 2023. But the eventual goal is to do 3 or 4 every year, just in various destinations. So I'm going to try to turn it into more of a, I don't want to say a main focus, but a co-focus of what I do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's important to highlight that kind of stuff because not a lot of people know, but travel is part of the reason that inspired me to take risks on myself. Like I might have just had like a stereotypical 9 to 5 still to this day, if not for the trips that I took traveling. And it's like a multifaceted thing. So part of it was the fact that it taught me that you can recover from big, daunting investments, even if they have you being very broke for a while. Because a lot of these trips, they cost like $2,000 or $3,000 or something, even if you're super frugal. Like my trips to Hawaii, I've camped on the beach and like it was still expensive. But you learn so much from being in that new environment. You get to see things with a new, fresh perspective, and you can kind of put yourself in environments that you can also transpose to different situations. The one example being somewhere in the time that I was just starting to do like part-time gigs within the fitness industry, but was still in my full-time role outside of the fitness industry. I went to Costa Rica with a friend of mine and we did some backpacking. Very cool. I am like scared of heights. Like I mostly scared of just the thought of dying if I fall. Not scared of like elevation. Like, I could be in a skyscraper, look out the window, but I can't be like at the edge of a mountain and like see the rocks crumble down. That just like makes me freeze. And so my friend, knowing full well what I wanted to do with my life, that I wanted to change careers, that I wanted to be in the fitness industry, that I wanted to inspire others, he kind of gave me a push to try bungee jumping. And bungee jumping was completely out of character for me, like very off brand. I'd be like the chicken in all scenarios. But I was like, I'm going to have to do this because I'm going to have a lot more courage in my life if I want it to unfold the way that I want it to. And just like that act of physically willing myself to do something that had a risk to it, but it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
so risky that I was going to just inevitably die. It was just
Mm,
something that just makes you nervous and scared and freeze up and
of
makes you
course.
hesitate.
Yeah.
Having gone through that gave me the courage to make the moves that I had to make and take the risks that I had to take to start my career. But with that story out of the way, having shared with you how travel has helped me, have you ever
Mhm.
had any epiphanies in any of your travels over your lifetime?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, I think there's been a few, like I haven't traveled extensively, aside from the retreats I did in Costa Rica. I have been to India, which was a fantastic trip. And I also did a trip to Thailand. And I guess it was an epiphany in a sense because it was a situation where I was supposed to go with a significant other and we had broken up. And so it was just like, I'm like, am I going to go? I can't get a refund. I guess I'm going to go. I'm in every airport and they keep calling her name and I have to go up to the desk. Yeah, no, she's not coming. I'm by myself like a big loser. But so I think that was a transformational trip in a sense, because it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I'm following my own path. Like I can kind of wake up when I want. If I want to do something, I want to climb that mountain. I can just do it. Like if I go along on a moped, I rented a moped. I can just take a detour here and go up on that cliff and just not, I mean, sure, it'd be nice to sort of be at the top of that and to be able to turn to somebody and say, "Isn't that beautiful?" And that's what I want eventually, But at the same time, it was freeing because I've always done something with somebody else, right? I was never that type of person to go off and travel on my own. And this time I was sort of forced into it. And I was kind of like, okay, you know what? I can sort of do this on my own and I can be fulfilled on my own. And, if and when I meet somebody, that's awesome, but I don't need that other, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I think that was kind of one of those moments. And then also, I think I've had a few in Costa Rica and just really that reemphasize the idea of connection, because you get a chance to really get to know people when you're with them most of the day. You know what I mean? It's not just like, okay, I see them for an hour, I see a friend for an hour. Like you really just find out who people are, and it really sort of opens the doors for sort of a deeper connection. And then, had an unexpected pivotal moment, which is a bit scary in the last trip to Costa Rica. I'll talk about it real quick, but we were it's on this beautiful stretch of beach, but it's quite isolated. And it gets quite wavy. So I was out there, and there's one woman who was there, and she, poor lady, she's this amazing person. I love her, and she was afraid to go in the water all week, and then finally had the courage to go in the water. And these are pretty big waves. So she's there. And my uncle also came on the retreat, is there. And, the waves started getting, all of a sudden, like, she's like, "Oh my God, guys, I can't touch the ground." And I'm like, "Oh shoot, I can't touch the ground either." So it was a moment of panic and nobody else was on the beach. I saw the last person from our crew sort of walking towards. So I yelled out, I'm like, "Hey, and she couldn't hear me." So in that moment, we're like, "Oh, so like we both grabbed her hand. We're swimming like crazy to the shore. We're going further back. The waves are coming. I'm swallowing salt water. I'm not a strong swimmer. Thankfully, my uncle is a stronger swimmer than both of us, but we just kept pushing. And like, it was just like, I'm getting exhausted at this point, and, she's panicking. And so I don't know what, like hand of God, whatever it was, we got to ground where we could, and I just like, it was a near death experience, and I don't want to over dramatize it. I mean, but I do feel like I had about 90 seconds left in me, and then I was going under, and there, the million thoughts are going through my head. So that was an inadvertent, not like an epiphany moment. It was kind of forced, but it's like, okay, I feel like I'm still meant to be on this earth, for whatever reason. And it just kind of shifted me to like, okay, now what, it sort of strengthened a resolve and a purpose within me that, okay, I think there's something that I can do in this world to sort of help people. And obviously, I wasn't meant to die today. So it was one of those moments where it was like scary as hell, but it definitely, it jolted me in some way, right? And it just happened to be sort of on this retreat, and we all had a kind of a laugh about it afterwards, but it was like, holy crap, like we just about died out there. So yeah.
You left a few wisdom nuggets there that I'll kind of like unpack for the listeners who may not have caught it, but it really just shone out to me as I was listening to you talk about solo travel, because that's been basically my existence for the last like 5 or so years. Just if I do something, I'm doing it by myself. And at first it was something that I took as like, oh, I'm doing it by myself. And then over time, with how much benefit I gained from like just pushing myself to do things solo, I started to realize it's kind of like I reference this song often. It's like the 8 Mile by Eminem, just like the movie, the track where he's like just unloading all of his weaknesses so that the other guy doesn't have anything to get him with.
Yeah.
I take that approach when it comes to just showing up in life, just our essence. Like if we are able to show up as fully as we are, and if we're able to experience as much as we can within that day, like what can somebody do to take that away from us? Because we took it ourselves, and we get to experience those moments, and we get to benefit from those experiences. So many of my biggest ideas have come on like solo road trips where I go to the mountains and I just reflect and I think, and I go on a long walk, and I wouldn't have had that moment if I had a companion. And so if people are listening, I hope that they feel encouraged and supported to go on a solo trip, even if you've been in like a 20-year relationship, even if you just started dating someone you're really excited about, prioritize a solo trip, because it's very, is moving. It helps you with your career, helps you with your personal life, helps you with your communication skills, because you start to get introspective and more self-aware to the degree where you start to realize like how you may have been putting something out to the world might not have been how the world saw it. And you get to reframe situations. And then
that's fantastic. Yeah.
The second piece that I wanted to get in, because it was just like, as we're bringing this episode to a close, this one is one that I think is underrated when it comes to life in general. And you're talking about that near-death experience. And I can relate to that. I too have had a near-death experience. And it's just, it rattles you in such a way that all of a sudden things that we think that we have time for, or things that we think we don't deserve, we kind of change that a little bit, where you're like, okay, I have to place a certain sense of urgency to this, because time is finite. We don't just get refund. And then just like you start to just own things that matter to you. Like we start to own how we show up as a trainer or a coach. Like this is just who we are. Nobody can take that away. No side hustle is going to dilute that. No side venture is going to make us less than. And it's simply because we only get this one shot. Mom spaghetti. But yeah, it's just there's so much value to going out and experiencing life and embracing the things that really do give us a bit of a flash of perspective. And I'm glad to hear that you survived that, because it would be a shame to not have been able to have this podcast episode.
Yeah, no, I knew I had to be on the podcast. I'm like, no, Chris still hasn't invited me on the podcast. I got to make it back.
I got to survive this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. And I think even if it's just a small scale, like even the small, like the short amount of times where I just go for a walk, there's just so much value in going for a walk and being with your own thoughts, or a hike. Right. And I think our society suffers from, what I think it's Cal Newport that said it, like a deprivation of solitude, because we live in a very noisy world, and there's very few opportunities and chances that we sort of carve out. And I do emphasize the word carve out, because they don't tend to happen organically. We have to make them happen, where we just get to be with our thoughts. Right. And that is often when a lot of clarity comes. That's often when I get some great ideas, or I have a breakthrough with my writing, so or some sort of life epiphany or what have you. Nothing that dramatic, but you know what I mean? It gives you clarity.
Absolutely. And the way that you said carved out, like what I would say for our listeners is how to action that into place. Start booking yourself for you
Mm,
appointments. Like for myself on my Google Calendar, I'll just put out like a block of an hour and a half, and that's for my long ass walk. That's when I'm going walking.
mm,
And it
awesome.
takes me such amount of time to get to the location and such amount of time to get back. And the distance is going to be this amount. And then it's blocked out and it's going to happen. And like sometimes if I have a hard time actually following through, I'll just tell somebody else I'm going to go for a walk. And then they
Mm,
either join me on said walk or they
mhm.
poke me and be like, hey, how was your walk? And I'm like, oh, shit. Be right
Yeah,
back. So,
yeah.
like looping other people into your journey and your process is helpful, and staying connected is just so moving in what can happen with it.
Mm,
With most of my episodes as of late, I have the guest give the audience a challenge for the day. So now it is
mm.
your turn to give that challenge.
All right, I like it, and I'm gonna, you know what? I'll just kind of logically leapfrog on what you just said. Like, create that time and go for a walk. Give yourself a you date and just get out there and do it. And it can be that simple. I think we just, I get it. The whole thing with social media now is walking is underrated, almost to a point where it's becoming overrated. But it's like, no, like that is good. Like that is useful. Psychologically, emotionally, physically. It's definitely. I think that's the number one. I think I always tell people you're never more than 5 minutes away from being able to turn your health around. That's that first step, and you take that first step both sort of proverbially and physically, and then just keep taking those steps.
Absolutely. And I mean that's a challenge that I'm probably going to take on in a few hours here, where I'm going
Nice.
to think about our conversation and see what I can gain from it and check out those book recommendations, which I hope everybody else does as well. But with that said, thank you for so much for being on the show today.
Oh, Chris, this was awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the conversation and your time.